Hello there, welcome to another episode of Underground Knowledge. I'm James Mock and my guest today is Thomas Sheridan. Now, Thomas is an Irish author, artist, researcher, and even a magician. Many of you will know Thomas from his best-selling books. They're on two best-selling books actually on Psychopaths, Puzzling People and Defeated Demons. So Thomas, welcome and thanks for coming on.
Hi James, I'm delighted to be there.
And
How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. And I wanted to congratulate you on all you're doing. You're covering the almost the spectrum of the arts. You're like a Renaissance man, a polymath, but also I find you a really refreshing voice in these type of fields, whether it's, you know, whatever you call it, like underground knowledge or forgotten wisdom or anything like that, because you're calm with it. You're not making sweeping statements, and I've had a lot of long-term questions that particularly these two books on psychopaths actually answered for me. So that was awesome. And one of the things when I was reading these two books is I know that they were written, I think they were published about 5 years ago, and I assume written maybe closer to a decade ago. Have you had any additional ideas on psychopaths since? That was going through my head as I was reading it.
Yeah, I think the last one came out in 2012. The first one was 2011. It's a while now, actually. Have I had any? No, until very recent I have. There hasn't been an awful... What happened was I wrote Puzzling People when no one was talking about psychopaths. And then suddenly, out of the blue, it became like a big cultural thing. There was mainstream books every week written about the topic, and then it became like a buzzword in society and a trope, and everyone was psychopath, 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 and everyone was, you know, it developed into an almost an element of mass hysteria at one stage. People were thinking they were psychopaths because they paid a bus fare one day, or they thinking their ex who, you know, left them was a psychopath, or their next door neighbor who, you know, and it actually went into like mass hysteria for a while. And so I stayed well out of that, and as it degenerated and fell apart, because it was like I could see it was like a magical spell that collapsed, and so I just put my heart was into things like mysteries, ancient mysteries, and megaliths, and mythology and magic, and I sort of like put myself into that, and I'm still very much deeply into that. But in recent weeks, it's funny you mentioned that now, because in recent weeks, I think there was a story someone posted to my Facebook wall of a woman who had like basically been like a textbook female psychopath who would pretend that she had cancer in order to raise money to go on vacation. Okay. And we just started a regular conversation on it. I'd forgotten how much I actually knew about the topic and I'd researched. And I was like peering into it. And then I was saying to myself, people have said to me, you should write another book on it or do some more on it. And I says, well, there hasn't been really a lot of new research done into the thing. It's the funniest thing that it's almost like the research ended in 2013. And ever since then, there's been the odd thing now and again. But like in terms of like the kind of people like Robert Hare and the other people involved in it, it just kind of fell flat. It's almost like maybe the kind of endowments that fund university research programs says we're not putting any more money into psychopaths. It could be something like that, you know? Yeah. But it died. It literally died a death. It really is weird, yeah.
Right. Well, you mentioned there's a number of things in here that I've been thinking at the back of my mind for a while. One was you really cover, this is how to put this, but you cover a tricky subject to describe, which is that psychiatry is not exactly like you're very pro science like I am, but then you're pointing out that science has its limits, and that I think to solve something like psychopaths requires, it's almost like we need to cover it from various angles, and definitely the scientific research is important, but then you're pointing out they've got their limits. And one of the things you mentioned here is that the brain, the scientists are always looking at the brain as being the seat of consciousness. But then, you know, there's the other, you know, they don't have proof of that, but they've just accepted that, which to me is anti-scientific until we know why. They've just said that's it. And I resonate more with your idea that there's some sort of energy before that, and the the brain is really mirroring whatever that energy is.
Yeah, absolutely. I've no doubt about that at all. Now, when the neuroscience, now it's been a while now since I've looked into this, so it may have changed. Right. But I used to get the research papers from university research programs and so on and read them, and they were fantastically contradictory.
Right.
And you know how mass media is. They will see, you know, a lot of these research papers will say, will suggest, could be, might suggest, indicates, these kinds of terms. As soon as a journalist from like a magazine or a newspaper picks it up, it becomes fact. Like there was a bit of a fetish for a while there that it was caused by deficiencies in the frontal cortex of the brain.
Right.
Now, and there was loads of articles that came out and said psychopaths, their frontal cortex is damaged. Well, no, it's not damaged. If you look at, if you actually read the papers beyond the sound bites, the frontal cortex is fully functional. What happens is it does not activate for them. So it's like the brain, I use the term courses for courses. They use exactly the brain they need, the predatory parts of the brain. And they simply have no requirement for the frontal cortex where you have compassion and empathy and these kinds of ideas. And the mirror neurons, which actually, how empathy really work, how neurons in social intelligence in terms of an empathic connection. And they couldn't be bothered using them. So it's like, that's really what it is. Oh, I have absolutely no doubt it's an underlying consciousness, and the brains are not damaged in any way. They're just showing what is underneath there needs to use it.
Right. It's, I mean, the other thing you mentioned here is that they're kind of watering these by using terms like sociopath, narcissist, they're kind of watering it down. And that gets back to what you were saying, where suddenly everyone can be termed a psychopath, whereas you mentioned the book, like only about 4% of the population. That's pretty rare, 4 in 100 people.
It's not, and that would be 4% proto-psychopaths and hardcore psychopaths. When I say natural psychopaths. A natural-born psychopath, you're probably talking 1%, and in most situations it might be even lower. You'd probably get 4% clustering as you're near the top of big things like banking and stuff like that. It's extremely rare. It's still extremely rare, like even by their own figures. The problem is that, and this is more of a cultural issue, is that these types have a tendency to become very powerful in business and politics and global finance, and in order to operate in these fields, individuals around them start functioning in this manner, on a proto-psychopathic manner, where they start emulating the psychopathic pathology in terms of, and then you have like basically what I call the psychopathic control grid, where basically society and say modern finance functions exactly the same as a serial killer. Because from my own experience working in places like Goldman Sachs years ago on Wall Street, well, that's exactly how I found out about this. I was reading serial killer books, profiles on serial killers at the same time, noticing that basically I was working for one.
Holy shit. Okay.
The company. I mean, in a metaphorical sense. So so it's like, it's not to say that we live in a kind of a psychopathic world.
No.
In some ways we do, other ways we don't. I'm not nihilistic and terrified. That was another reason I got sick of it. People were living in terror. Yeah. I mean, there was people that really, they should really have, like some people are not ready for horror movies or not ready for certain video games. Well, some people are just not ready for my books, and it just sent to the states of paranoia.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was mentioning at the start. You're a calm. The way you present research and your ideas is calm, and there's just so much paranoia out there. And I also liked how you ultimately say once you advise people to if they're ever in the orbit of these people, you've just got to have no contact ever again. Rid yourself of them. Don't ever hope that they can change. But at the same time, once you've done that, you're really saying that we shouldn't fear these people. And there's quite an interesting idea in here, and it reminded me of something in say microbiology. And you're presenting an idea that people, what was it? Oh yeah, that these psychopaths maybe have a function for us in society and the way we can evolve. And it reminded me of, say, in microbiology, where when you're young, you know, you get chicken pox or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you develop an immunity for life. It's almost like if we can survive these people, there's a strength from that. And I like the positives you take from this overall thing. And I think there's many people who will be on the verge of despair even after they've survived these people. And I think there's real hope in your books, whereas the academic books I've read on this, it's pretty, all the extreme conspiracy, you know, exaggeration stuff, it's all pretty depressing. And that's a problem, I feel.
Yeah, my attitude was, look, try and learn something from this. Now, that was one of the most controversial aspects of, particularly the second book's Defeated Demons. I said, maybe, just maybe, on some grand cosmic level, hypothetically speaking, you know, not bringing religion or spirituality into it, they serve a purpose through their appearance in society. They're almost like a echo from the distortions in the collective unconscious. And one of the things I gave to describe that was, like, growing up in Ireland when I was a kid, the Catholic Church had tremendous power in this country, enormous power, and it was doing awful things like throwing, you know, babies into septic tanks and imprisoning women in laundries, washing clothes, and pardon me, endless sex scandals. Yeah. Well, because of the psychopathic environment, microsystem, microclimate, whatever, that was all functioning in, it encouraged greater levels of pathology. It was these greater levels of pathology by the psychopaths unable to put the brakes on that alerted society to what was going on as a whole. As a result, the Catholic Church was wiped out, and they have almost no power in Ireland now. And that would not have happened if there wasn't been, like, extreme psychopathic priests who did things like rape young boys, make videotapes of them and this kind of thing, and then write letters saying, you know, a message from heaven. And then the church fathers saying, oh, well, you know, we're taking care of it. And then it happens again and again and again. And so it was that maybe it's like I like your analogy a lot, James, of the chicken pox. I think there's definitely an element of truth to that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's and the other thing is, you mentioned that most of the people that it sounds like you've, over the years, or during, in this publishing period when these books first came out at least, and while you were writing, researching, you spoke to thousands of people who have survived or were enduring these psychopaths. And you mentioned an interesting thing that most of them form some sort of belief beyond that there's just the physical earth, that there's some sort of other energy. And it's almost that almost implies like an evil consciousness, or I don't know, but there's something. I mean, I've come into orbit with these people too. I'm kind of a survivor too, and there is something there that does feel a bit. I won't say like a horror movie, but it does feel there's something there, all right?
Well, when I interviewed two of them for Defeated Demons, and I looking face to face with them, they were not human beings staring back at me. They were not. What they were, but there was something else in there. Wow. Yes, I think, you know, I don't know anyone who's went through this experience as an atheist. For real. Right. You know, can we indulge words like it's a demon inside there? I think it's a useful metaphor. Absolutely. Sure. You know, if you want, you know, ultimately everything like that boils down to metaphor anyway. And so, you know, if that helps someone recover or deal with it, I have no problem with that at all. Good luck to them. If it's a healing tool, I'd rather people say it's a pit demon from the depths of the abyss, rather than say it's an unwell person who needs understanding.
Oh my God, do people say that? Okay.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I've got letter. You know, this is one of the reasons I pulled out of it as well. These emails are starting to really upset me and get me down. I've read horrific things that I wouldn't put it in a book if it came out to me. Horrific stories of abuse in families and things like that, and it was really getting me down after a while. Yeah,
I could imagine. It's almost like it's almost like those policemen who infiltrate like pedophile rings and that, and they're a total you know, they're having to analyze all the footage and all that stuff, and it's like, it's too heavy.
And I wasn't trained for that.
No, and that's true.
Also, I got approached by a lot of policemen, actually, particularly in England, and they would like tell me stories like, "Oh, I read your book and saw your videos. You're bang on." And they got to tell you something else. They're not human, and they tell me about some notorious child molester, a serial killer, and they'd be describing something out of a horror film. You know, like a 70-year-old guy who killed 20 children, who could jump up on a 6-inch ledge at 70 years old and masturbate 20 times a day. Who would spend all day. Yeah, and any insult you threw at him would give it back. You would. Oh, there's some of these stories I heard would blow your mind. Oh yeah, I've got like an archivist. Maybe when I'm ready for it. But some of the things I heard from one friend of mine is in the Met in London. It just like it had hair standing up on my thing. It was like Jimmy Savile, like Jimmy Savile times 100.
Holy shit!
And so there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. There was also a thing like I always said to people, being a former stand-up comic myself, is just to keep telling jokes and make the jokes as funny, outrageous, and see the most outrageous. Just take yourself into the world of outrageous comedy, because it will help you deal with it. Otherwise, you will get the same with people in the conspiracy world. So many of them are consumed by it to the point where it destroys their lives. You got to maintain your sense of humor at any cost. There's a reason why the jester is the only one in the court who manages to survive. It's important, and that was a big thing as well. And I'd always try to throw humor into these things and stuff like that, and it's very, because it's very, you cannot fight if you're afraid. You cannot run if you're afraid. You're frozen solid. But if you can laugh, you can build a wall around yourself.
Yeah. Well, these I would recommend that. So, Puzzling People and Defeated Demons. That to me felt like I don't feel like. I mean, I could be wrong here. Maybe there will be a change, but I felt like that's the totality of what you have to say in this. The second book really gave me everything I wanted, and then the rest from there, people can. It's a good mix of your intuition, your research into ancient peoples, and then you've studied science a lot too there. So that's a valuable. I don't think anyone else will write something like those books, and it's I learned loads, and that kind of moves me on to in Defeated Demons. You mention this is something I saw in 61 AD. The Romans killed off the remaining Druids. So they were if anyone doesn't know, they were an ancient people in pre-Christian in throughout Europe, but particularly in Britain and Ireland. And you word that as if that these people were I don't know if I read this right, but you imply that they were perhaps less psychopathic than the Romans, or they had, or maybe the Romans have become prototype psychopaths or something like this. And I see I haven't read it, but I see you've written a book called The Druid Code: Magic, Megaliths, and Mythology. So what do you feel was important about the Druids?
The same thing with all indigenous people. You remember, Europeans are indigenous people as well. We sometimes forgot that because we were Europeans, but our ancestors were indigenous people as well at one time.
Right.
Now, are indigenous people more saintly and wonderful and closer to? No, they're not. They're just like the rest of us. But if you look at the history of psychopathy in indigenous cultures, and Martha Stout in The Sociopath Next Door did some great stuff on this. Indigenous people kill them. They recognize them.
Really?
They killed them as a teenager. Yeah, they will recognize them at an early age, because remember, if you're in a tribal structure where like the survival between life and death is pretty close, you can't afford to have someone in there who's compromising the entire integration of this tribe in terms of its survival structures.
That's
true. They will recognize them right away. And there's like the Inuits, they take them, so they would kill them. All these bog bodies that they found all over Europe, they're all the pedophiles and psychopaths. They would just kill them. And the fact, it's very interesting too, that the Druids would probably even note in the society. See, in Defeated Demons, I just from running a big spreadsheet, actually it was an Access database.
Okay.
I discovered that there are seasonal flare-ups to psychopathic behavior. The springtime makes perfect sense if you think about it. A lot of us come to life in spring, and so would they.
True.
And a lot of people who had relayed their stories to me, it either happened in spring or in autumn. And the springtime is always the same. That's when they were initially approached by the psychopath, lured, love bombed, taken in, and usually they were also disposed of around that time again, because the psychopath had found a new target to move on to, and this kind of thing. Now, I think like that's what they would have done. I think you would have had like Druids or any kind of mystic or holy men or wise men or women in tribes would wait until this time of year in the northern hemisphere and wait for types that would like flare up attacking other members of the tribe, stealing and robbing, and they'd probably just seize them and they'd be the ones they'd sacrifice. And this is, yeah, so that's what those bog bodies were, I'm pretty sure. I nearly bet money on it, and that's why they killed them. The Roman Empire is a fascinating study, but what happened was in AD 60 and 61, you had the Iceni revolt in England, Boudica, and basically in mass uprising against Roman rule. It terrified the Romans. It was quite a big success for the Iceni until the Romans drove them out of the woods and were able to beat them in open battle. But at the end of it, the Druids were all in Anglesey in Wales, and Suetonius Paulinus, the Roman governor of England, launched an attack across the Menai Straits to Anglesey and massacred the last of the Druids. That's how afraid of them they were. And of course, some of them did escape to Ireland, of course. And I just used that as the opening of the book to show that maybe for a long time now, because of the powerful imperial or colonialist structures, there has been, excuse me, an agenda to destroy indigenous or natives peoples because they're wise to the psychopathic control grid by nature. And this, you see this repeat all over the world. Native Americans, the Australian Aborigines, it goes on and on and on and on and on. Empire moves in, the indigenous people are either destroyed or made useless somehow, and that's it. And there has to be a reason for that. There has to be a reason for that more than that. This is our land, that's your land.
There has to be a reason for that, Thomas, because I saw a video where you were talking about the Dogon, are people I really respect in northwest
Mali,
Africa.
And West Africa.
And so that's a similar thing. We've got the Christian faith wiping out all these ancient pagan peoples all over Europe, and then throughout the British Empire and all that. And then you've got the Muslims who are fearing, like a Dogon are a tiny percentage of that African area. Why are these big religions so afraid of these people?
Well, because of that reason. The ancient religions have a special connection with reality and the universe that they don't. And it's very, there's a fantastic book came out last year by Catherine Nixie. She's a Cambridge professor, wrote called The Darkening Age. It's basically about the early history of Christianity, and it's appalling, absolutely appalling. I mean, basically Christianity, once it got into power in the Roman Empire after Constantine the Great, realized that he had all these crazies that he could use to enforce his will. It was just the genocides and intolerance which continued on to the 1500s, when the Swedish Crusades was launched into Karelia and Prussia to wipe out the last of the pagans. It's almost, it actually finishes the book by saying there is not one single person alive in Europe today who can directly connect their lineage back to the pagans, meaning the family is still pagan.
Really?
Not one. Not
is that
one
right?
single person. Every single one has been either Christianized or exterminated. Now there has to be a reason for that.
So you're saying we can't? Sorry, you're saying we can't trace our lineage? Like I'm Celtic, like you. Most of my blood's
but
that.
Your family's Christian, though.
Right.
I'm talking your spiritual.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, like so it's like my ancestors would be Catholics and Protestants and blah blah.
True.
And then back to like Celtic Christians and then pagans. And you're talking about, 15, 1600 years ago, or maybe sooner. I don't know. It depends. And the same would be for you. The same. It's a spiritual lineage. It's not one person alive in Europe who can actually go back and say, all the way back, my family has been pagan.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
That's quite a shocking statement when you think there was probably 60 million pagans at one time.
Right. So a lot of the megaliths say if we look at Ireland for a minute, a lot of the megaliths out there, the the Druids were building all these, and nobody exactly knows why. But what's your theories on those?
No, the Druids, this is a common misconception. The Druids did not build the megaliths. The megaliths were
Okay.
built thousands of years before the Druids.
All right.
The,
Okay.
the Druids were the priest kind of like administrative class of the Celtic peoples, but the Celtic people have only been around about 3,000 years. Many of the megaliths are 6 and 7,000 years old, 5, 6, 7, going well back into the Neolithic era.
Right.
We don't know who built them. This is
That's similar to I went to the Mexican pyramids, Teotihuacan, and originally they were claiming, just like I've seen reports, maybe I was watching older reports where they said the Druids built Stonehenge and all that, but I think the new consensus, as we go further, we work out, oh no, it goes back much older, and so they thought originally that the Aztecs and the Mayans and that were building these Mexican ones, and then they've worked out, no, we don't know, and I think it's becoming the same, even with the Egyptian pyramids.
It goes back, it's pre-pharaonic.
Pre-pharaonic, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think the Druids inherited these? Do you think they still had some of the ancient culture of whoever built those megaliths?
Yeah, they were inherited a proto-shamanic tradition that would have came from that.
Right.
And they did use those sites, and they did build some of their own, but they weren't like Stonehenge or the famous ones like Carnac or Newgrange in Ireland. They weren't those ones. They had their own ones, and the Druids tended to worship in groves in the forest, which is where the term Druid comes from, the oak tree. Druid is the Irish word for oak. And so, yeah, and it's a Proto-Celtic word for oak as well, is similar. And so but they did use those sites in some cases, in some they didn't. Like Stonehenge has not been used for probably 3,000 years. So before the Celts even came along, it wasn't used. But there's various debates on that. But the Celts did not build those stone monuments. They were there long before the Celts arrived. But it's a common misconception, because even when you switch on TV shows today and there's a documentary about the Celts, invariably they'll start off with a shot of
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Carnac, a dolmen or something, a dolmen somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just a massive misconception. They're much, much older. And it's also within the kind of academic world to play down how old they are, because they just don't want humans knowing that we existed before the Bible. There's a lot of that nonsense as well.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, the way people describe pagans, the average Christian, it's just like pagans were these bloodthirsty, sacrifices every day, just no goods, and that supposedly Christianity brought the light, and that people had never had anything spiritual before then, they'd never conceived of God, all this stuff. It's pretty
it's staggering. I saw a documentary on the BBC recently, and they had a guy, it was called How the Celts Saved Civilization.
Okay.
This guy Dan Snow, yeah, and he was the host. He's like one of these BBC talking head young guy types. And he had a guy called Eamon P. Kelly from the National Museum of Ireland, and he portrayed pre-Christian Ireland as a land of darkness, death. And you have this montage of a guy getting his throat cut and thrown into a ditch, and like a druid removing his entrails and whatever.
Oh my God! Okay.
And it was hopelessness and dark before the arrival of Christianity.
Right.
So the assumption was then implied and sequestered in the viewer's consciousness that once this fictional character called St. Patrick arrived with the new Roman Christian religion from the Middle East, that Ireland was transformed into a peaceful and cultural paradise. Now, I don't have to tell you how, in Ireland we found something like 5 or 6 bodies which have been used by Jesuits and so on, and academics, to show how wicked paganism is. Right. I think probably how many millions of Irish people have died because of Christian wars? This is the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah.
The absolute ridiculousness of it. It's the classic example of the victors, write the history.
Well, I think I plan to read that Druid Code as well, your book, and I think a lot of people are starting to sense what you're talking about. They're starting to look back to the past, and that brings us on to another thing. There's so many subjects you're covering in a really sophisticated way, but that the magic side is really, and that's something that I've been looking at lately, just getting into. But this is where I mentioned at the start here that you're presenting everything in a calm way. And as soon as you get into magic, if you type in that stuff on YouTube or whatever, the amount of sensationalism, or if they see the slightest, occult style imagery in a musician's,
Oh, yeah.
it's just like, and it becomes this really heavy shit the way they present it. And but it's not to say that I like the way you're presenting it. You're saying there's light and dark. Like I've seen that Swiss tunnel opening ceremony, and you can tell there's something heavy going on in there. But then this is where people misconstrue things, and I like the way you're sort of saying, well, there's good and bad in this, and it's how you want to use it. And I see you've written a book called Sorcery, The Invocation of Strangeness. And then I also watched a video, and this is a rare for a magician of, someone who's studied as much as you. You're actually presenting a lot of secrets, and I'd recommend it. I think it was called something like How to Practice Magic in the 21st Century. Yeah. So that would be my question to you. How do we, well, firstly, why would it be helpful for the average person to get into this stuff?
Because it's, firstly, any negative connotations about it comes from people being raised in a Christian or Abrahamic background. Sure. And they're told that anything that's not in the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah is evil. And that's the biggest problem we're dealing with, right? And then you have the other side of atheists and agnostics who say it doesn't exist at all.
Right.
Now, why is it important to study magic? Well, because it makes your life much easier, and it makes you understand the world much easier. I probably would not have been able to deal with the subject of psychopaths had I not had an interest and a grounding in magic before that, because I did not let myself be overcome by the experience. Rather, I saw it as in a kind of a metaphorical or a mythological terms, almost a monomyth kind of way, as James Joyce and Carl Jung might term it, the idea
Sure.
of your single journey through the labyrinth. And that's why I called it the labyrinth of the psychopath. Now, yeah, okay. Magic today is not the same as, the Dennis Wheatley or the Golden Dawn, or no. I don't wear a robe. I don't draw pentagrams on the ground. Mm-hmm. I do not, sacrifice animals, and I don't take part in rituals, ceremonial magic. There's no need for that anymore, because energy is far more abundant now than it was in the past. So therefore, you can use things like art, the internet, creativity, satire. These are the kinds of things you can use instead. What's the purpose of using them? Well, you can actually make your desires manifest easier if you're in the control of yourself and your environment energetically, rather than someone having control over you. So it's the same thing as like being in a band, and you're not allowed to play anything other than the specific song structures. Sure. And one day you say, screw this, I'm going to go off on a freeform solo, and suddenly someone notices you and say, that guy's a really good musician. Well, the rest of them, who are probably as good musicians as you were, are still playing the same sheet music. It's just like that. It gives you a sense of individuality within this kind of like 4 or 5 sense reality, in terms of an energetic kind of response and engagement with things. So yes, the operating system of the universe can be hacked. I can tell you that right now, and your listeners, it can be done. It's not as difficult as people think it is. It really requires elements of concentration. That doesn't mean sitting down trying to do mind rays towards your enemies. How you do it is art is a very good way, and creativity is a very good way of doing it. Allowing yourself to go on kind of freeform streams of consciousness. And in that video, I show how I used collages, for example. Yeah. One of the collages showed years before he was president of Barack Obama's legacy.
I saw that, Thomas, and it was, I'll tell you what, that was a Barack Obama right there.
Yeah, well, that was him. I think he was like mayor of Chicago or something like that at the time.
Yeah, he looked a bit younger, but I couldn't see, that was so much of a likeness. It was, uncanny.
Yeah, it was before he ran for president. I just thought it was the guy had an interesting face, and I cut it out of the newspaper. And and we saw this with 9/11. Look how many artistic and TV shows and album covers predicted the 9/11 attacks. They didn't predict them; they picked it up beforehand. They picked it up. They picked up the shockwave in the Matrix beforehand. And concentration is how you do it, and it gives you a kind of a seer type. view of reality, you handle things much. I'll give you a good example. Trump. Like, if people understood magic and how magic works, they would not have been in any way concerned about Trump except being excited by it. Was I excited, or were we excited by his politics, by his personality, by his campaign, by his platform, by his party? None of those things. What we were excited by was the fact that he was making the establishment terrified, and this was amazing. This was
that's true. Even if you don't like him, he was making the media go into a spin, wasn't he?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And this was releasing vast amounts of energy. So what does a magician do? Sit there all day going, oh, Trump is the president, the end of the world, and do that for the rest of your life? Or do you ignore that and concentrate on creating your own life better? Well, the answer is a magician will choose to concentrate on ignoring him. It's like the no contact ever again thing in a way. And the directing, you see, that's actually built on a magical spell that comes out of Slavic witchcraft, by the way. There's another exclusive. Oh, I think I've told people that before, but that's where that came from originally. Never underestimate the wise people of the past. And,
True.
Yes, and so that was a very important moment for me personally, because I, along with lots of other magicians and shamans and witches, were actively trying to stop Hillary Clinton from becoming president of the United States, because she is a psychopathic serial killer.
She's a psychopath, yeah.
Oh, and she's a very feckin' dangerous one too as well, and how people could not see that is beyond me. And that's why, you know, I mean, the night of, I was just talking to someone else there tonight about this, the night of the election, it was like the amount of energy that was unleashed that night for anyone who had any kind of magical insight was incredible. But too many people were going, oh, it's the end of the world. And you could kind of see who was finished going forward. You had musicians like Beck and Michael Moore and all these kinds of people, and you could basically see sealing their own annihilation by refusing to accept the reality of the moment, the zeitgeist. And these things are important. So
magician would, I mean, I like that I think you could apply that to anything beyond politicians and all that, is you don't give your power away, it sounds like. You don't just say, you use whatever energy is in the moment, and there's always potential within that. Is that right?
Yeah, and that potential will be unleashed. Remember, the same energy that's putting people in anguish over Trump is the same energy that you can use for your own creativity.
Okay.
It's abundant. It's abundant, and it's all neutral. It's all neutral at the point of zero. It's what you choose to do with it. And that's the difference. Now, what's black magic is when you impose your will on another person without their requesting it. So that could be even something like, trying to get, putting a love spell on someone that doesn't have any interest in you. That would be black magic. People don't think it is. That's what it is. You should never, ever use your power or your energy to affect another person's life, because that's when you've gone left-hand path. Then the purpose of a magical path is to improve your own spiritual journey and self-awareness, and nothing else. And it's an amazing thing. And I have to laugh when I see all these bloody videos on the internet. Someone finds a pentagram in a Katy Perry video, and she's a satanic and all this kind of stuff. It's extremely unhealthy. Firstly, it's ignorant, and secondly, you're just continuing that old Abrahamic horror that's caused all the problems in the past. You're achieving nothing by it. And if there was some real genuine evil behind it, you're feeding it.
Yeah, true.
Like making videos about it and pushing it all over the internet. You're feeding it. This. So and it's like things like pentagrams are benevolence. They're neutral, just like the swastika is neutral. It's what you do with it.
Right.
And so, the ignorance out there always amazed me. It was like, and a lot of it came from American Bible Belt Christianity and satanic panic in the 1980s and all that stuff. Yeah. And that's why that was his genesis.
Even a lot of the New Agers, they're sort of they scream Satanism at the drop of the hat, and I think they haven't sort of embraced their shadow side, the New Age people. So it's kind of everything's positive, and in the slightest thing that's a bit unusual, they're satanic, So
and that shadow will build up and explode like a volcano if you don't let it out.
Actually, that reminds me, Thomas, that I heard a saying that the more moralistic a society becomes, the more immoral its behavior. And I think you can see that nothing's a better example of that than the Catholic Church. Like, they're stopping people doing you know, priests are so hamstrung that maybe it just makes them do evil. I don't know.
Well, it was conceived that way. Early Christianity was obsessed with castration. That's where the Catholic priest celibacy comes from.
Really? So they used to castrate?
Shit. Oh yeah, that was a big thing. They'd castrate themselves to make themselves pure. And so eventually they realized if they keep castrating themselves, there'll be none left. So how we have something like celibacy or something like that is not as violent. Oh yeah, you were a superstar in early Christianity if you had no penis and testicles. People would actually would follow you around like you were amazing, and they'd want to see it. There was a group called the Stylites who used to devote their lives to piety by standing on top of a pagan column of an old pagan temple, or of something like that in Greece, like, or Syria, to Athena and these kinds of pagan gods. And they would stay up there for months and months on end until because of inactivity, their bowels would collapse and their stomachs would explode open, and their entrails would shower down on the hysterical, fawning, adoring believers below as a sign of a great Christian martyr. I mean, this is the early history of Christianity. It's
the
like,
average Christian doesn't know it, so it's hard. No. Well,
yeah, it's like ISIS on steroids. And you know, if Islam took over the world in 2,000 years' time, if you mentioned things like ISIS, they would say never happened.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to this magic video that I watched of yours, it goes on for about 45 minutes. It's amazing. But what I like is that this is very rare, is that you're sharing. Well, this is what I guessed with what you're implying is you're sharing some of the secrets to your success so far in your career, and how you're able to get focus, which is a big thing for people. And I think some of this maybe ties into certain celebrities we're seeing. Like, I believe in Hollywood, it can be good and bad, but they're using a lot of the celebrities, particularly, as you know, we're both in the arts, and people in the arts, they're more open to this stuff. And it can be used in good and bad, but I believe you're sort of pulling back the curtain to a number of people have achieved success, or maybe they've formed a relationship with their fan base almost etherically, or whatever you want to call it, through this sort of stuff. So
yeah, David Bowie would be a classic example of a magician in that sense.
Oh, okay.
You know, he literally spellbound people for 40 years. His whole career was a magic spell, magic.
Well, interesting you said it, because he said somewhere that he's not an artist. He's a communicator.
Yeah, even his final Black Star album and his Black Star video. I mean, that was a big magical ritual, and all these characters he invented, like Aladdin Sane and Ziggy Stardust and Major Tom. These were all his magical personas. He could do, you know, this is the power, and this is the power. But he also practiced magic anyway. He messed around with Crowley type things. He summoned a demon once in his house in Beverly Hills, and he used the cut-up technique, which I demonstrate in the video, chopping up words you write down words, you chop them up, and you rearrange them, and you let them fall as they may, and the most remarkable sort of dialogue with the subconscious develops. And there's a video of him doing his cracked actor tour of the United States in the 70s, and you actually show him demonstrating the William Burr version of the cut-ups. So yeah, I mean, a lot. This is yes. There's charisma that people naturally have. They naturally have charisma. But there's also a way of developing your charisma, and magic is one of the best ways of doing it.
Wow, I can't wait to read your books on that. And I'm just getting into this particular subject of magic and the occult. But the cut-up technique is one I'm definitely going to try. And I'd heard that about Bowie, and I even heard towards the end of his career, he actually got someone to develop a software so that all the lyrics were chosen. They're all chosen randomly, and then he creates a story out of that. And what I found quite funny is people are analyzing his lyrics as if he chose them all consciously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a true magician, is to actually utilize things like that and keep people guessing, and making it work into something like a piece of art or a product. That's ultimately what magic is art. Art and magic are the same thing. I mean, the most common forms of black arts that people see are things like the really debased forms of performance art, like people slashing their wrists or rolling around in excrement or painting themselves in their blood. That would be in performance art. Performance art is actually a cover for a lot of like black magic.
Are you talking like Marina Abramovich sort of stuff? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're honest about it. They're not hiding anything. They're not lying it. But the performance art scene has always been like that. I mean, the American painter Henry Darger, who was covered in a very amazing film called In the Realms of the Unreal back in the late 1990s.
Okay.
He was an outsider artist in Chicago who was a janitor, but he was also suspected in being a child sex killer. And he created artworks and wrote the biggest novel in history about young naked girls destroying the planet, involved in destroying the empires of the earth, called the Vivian Girls. And he painted them, drew them naked. But he was also one of the suspects in this. And the arts movement knew he was probably one of the suspects in it. But that's one reason they made him famous. Again, they were capitalizing on the charge.
Right, but people without your knowledge of ancient magic techniques, and then also without your emotional calmness, they look at examples like Marina Abramovich and things like that, and then they take it all out of context. But what I think you're opening the veil there is that with this magic video and your other books on it, is you seem to be presenting that there's another way to approach all this, and there's a calm way, and that I imagine most of the celebrities are actually using it in a positive way.
Yeah, lots of people are. Lots of business people are using it in a positive way. Lots of successful people you've probably heard of, are successful because they've used magic. Again, it's about safeguarding your charge. It's safeguarding your magical space. You draw that magical circle around yourself, and you safeguard that, because there's no end of external entities who want to do that for you, from corporations to governments to media. They will put you inside a magic circle of their own making and make you a slave. And that's what all that fear of these kind of conspiratorial fears, or Christian or New Age fears you were saying, of magic is them not in charge of their own magical space. That's what it comes down to. Okay. They're not. You look at this with neutrality. You don't look at this in terror. You don't look at this in hype, or because you're either feeding it or and you're being eaten alive by it. I mean, it's as simple as that. And people have to learn how to be detached and sit from it, and then learn to understand. Look, I mean, you watch these videos and you've never seen one question where they say, why did they do it? I mean, notice that.
That's true. That's true.
And the reason why they do it is because it works.
Okay.
And the charges, they may be lying about it. Marina Abramovich may be the biggest spoofer in the world, the biggest, play actor in this stuff. But she's having a charge from all the hysterical people who are fired up by it. And she's getting rich because of it. She's getting famous because of it. And that's how it works. Shock art is energy harvesting. That's what that is.
Okay, like spirit cooking and that. So what you presented there, and you presented some amazing works of art you've done, and it came from this sort of, not only just cut-ups, but dream journals, and kind of not control. You know how some people would control the art, like it's, okay, I'm going to paint this, I'm going to do exactly this, before they even do it, whether it's a painting or a story or whatever. But you're getting into the areas where it's more, you allow something else, whether it's your subconscious mind or something else, to direct it and surprise you. And I think that's often, if you look at the history of artists, it seems to be that's where the better art comes in. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's going to maybe shock people, but when I paint a painting in like a dreamscape or a painting like that, I'm demonically possessed. Now people think, "Oh, I'm demonically possessed." Yes, I am.
There's people on YouTube now typing in Thomas Sheridan. Yeah. Thomas Sheridan admits he's a,
Oh yeah, that'll be all over YouTube, and guess what happens? I'm fed by it.
Right.
But and then more people know about me, more people discover my work, and more people are helped eventually. And that's what it's really all about. But demonically possessed, the word demon comes from a Greek word meaning genius. That's all it means. And genius in the Greek term meant the muse, the unseen voice, the subconscious mind, the greater part of ourself, which channels this work through our nervous system and onto the page as a play, a painting, or drawing, a song, or a piece of music. And that's what demonically possessed used to mean. being possessed by a genius, by the muse. And that's what those paintings are done. They're done, you know, modern sensualists just say, I let the muse pass through me. But the Greeks, ancient Greeks, used to say, my daemon is being possessed. You know, and that's what that meant, and that's where that came from. Well, Christians and Abrahamics don't like the idea of you getting messages from anyone that isn't a burning bush or a Virgin Mary.
Right. So it's okay when you get possessed by the Holy Spirit, but you can't
exactly.
be possessed.
So the ancient Greeks and Romans and the ancient pagan people were demonically possessed all the time. And what did they build? Just look at the classical world. The temples, the cities they built, Athens, Rome, Herculaneum, the incredible architecture, the art, the philosophy, the music. They did that by not being, by allowing themselves to go into these states and letting the muse come through. And that went on through the Enlightenment as well. Like someone said to Mozart, where does your music come from? He said, it just arrives. It just comes inside me. And Mozart was a big-time Freemason. Remember, the Magic Flute is a Freemasonic opera. There you go. I mean, people see. That's another thing you were saying. We're joking there about Tommy Sheridan's demonically possessed, which is kind of funny anyway. But it just goes to show that ignorance will get you nowhere. Ignorance, you know, just reacting with a fear-based ignorance and not actually taking the time to understand this stuff will actually handicap you as a person. It'll handicap you.
I agree, and there's so much, and that's the conspiratorial side, is creating that fear, disempowerment in people, and that they, as you said, they never ask why the people are doing it. That all they see is the result, but we don't know. Well, what could this be? But clearly, it's really interesting, Thomas, that there's more and more magic being displayed, and I also think in the arts. Artists are naturally, they start to realize after a while, well, it is kind of possession, it is kind of channeling, and that's probably why they're more open. There's just a natural progression, I think, with great artists like David Bowie, where they just eventually just look at it's just a natural idea to go into the occult and magic.
Yeah, but even things like a lot of scientists are occultists as well. They'll never talk about it in public.
Right.
But so many scientific discoveries have been made by the eureka moment. You know, the greatest science, there's a book called Everything You Know Is Wrong, and it showed that the top 20 greatest scientific discoveries, none of them were made in a lab by fellas in white coats holding a test tube. It was a guy riding a bicycle in the park, someone sitting in the park, someone listening to a piece of music. And that's what that was. That's what that was.
It's inspiration, yeah. So do our subconscious minds speak a different language? Like, is it the language of symbology?
Yeah, because the thing with it, the subconscious mind can't talk to us in words because it's older than what it talks to us in symbols,
right?
And metaphors and stories and parables through dreams, because it comes from a time before language was invented. So it speaks to us in symbols. It speaks to us in archetypes. This is a great way of, and synchronicities and simulacrum. This is a great way to actually develop your magical charisma, is to look for synchronicities, observe them and enjoy them, and watch them happen more and more frequently as you develop this relationship with them. And then you realize, my God, I'm hacking the universe, because things you will be talking about will appear the next day. You will suddenly think about something in your head, switch on Facebook, and it's the first thing at the top of your browser. And this is your magical self becoming more powerful. The whole 11:11 thing, where people are noticing that on the clocks, that's a real phenomenon, by the way. Right, that was that's part of your magical self developing. Don't overanalyze it. Don't go mental about it. Just notice it, enjoy it, and embrace them, and it will happen constantly over and over again. And you will notice that. Another one is simulacrum, and look, when you see faces in the shapes of trees or in clouds and stuff like that, that also is a great way of like building your magical awareness much stronger. Very simply to do that, and then along with the simulacrum, along with the synchronicities, and then starting to see the world in archetypes is very important. Like, see yourself as an archetype. Say, like, it's, back to the monomyth, the Jungian kind of Joycean idea of the monomyth. You have, you're going through a difficult time in life. You're a hero on a quest. You're Frodo. you know, and along the way, you start looking at it, you do meet dragons, you do meet helpers, you do meet wizards, you do meet temptrists.
Sure.
And then you suddenly realize that, my God, my life is not ordinary. It's anything but that. And it's a miracle, all the things and all the incredible things that I had to do to be still alive and still doing that now. And when you start to see yourself in these mythic terms, again, the magic happens, the opportunities open. The operating system of the universe and the structure of the integration of the universe becomes softer. You can attract your desires and your wants to you much more easily, because something funny about the universe, it kind of wants to play with you at the same time. It's almost like a kitten. It gives and takes, and and if you have sincerity in your heart, decency, and an honest will, you take one step towards the universe, it will take 10 steps towards you.
Wow. Okay. Well, the other thing is, you mentioned a really good analogy here is with going back to the symbology is, I can't remember which book it was in, but you mentioned that the ending of 2001 A Space Odyssey by Kubrick, who must have been a magician, I think, or something. He must have been into this stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The ending of that makes absolutely no fucking sense, right? There's no way as a story. If you could study screenwriting till you're blue in the face. There's no logic to that. But everyone seems to get it and goes, yeah, that's awesome. Whereas a lot of other movies, if you do that, if you just did anything you want by the end, people would destroy that. But somehow everyone goes, what a great ending. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the 2001 is a movie that was written for the subconscious. It wasn't written for the conscious mind. And that's why even people who were not very well educated, I mean, you know, just ordinary people who have regular jobs and are not, when I say educated, I don't mean to put them down. I mean in the kind of sense that they're not, like, they don't have a kind of an interest in the subjects we do, say, for instance. They would watch a film like that and maybe couldn't understand what it was about, but still felt that there was something that happened there.
Wow.
You know, that was a very common response. When that movie first came out in the cinemas, that was a big hit, that film. Yeah. And people would say the same things. I didn't understand it, but I really, really liked it, and I want to see it again.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, the whole film is an alchemical progression. Basically, it's basically alchemy 101. And obviously, Kubrick knew about this stuff. And the baby at the end is, you know, a new form of consciousness, a new kind of human being born as a kind of a star child. And this kind of thing, you know, and I think he knew a lot of things. I mean, one of the things I'm quite conspiratorial about is that I think there's a lot of things in space they're hiding from us. Yeah, that doesn't mean I'm not talking necessarily about aliens. No. I just think that, like, there's a video I've made on my channel that's got great response. It's called "The Shamanic Consequences of Space Travel," or the shamanic.
What a heading.
Yeah, and it's actually one, and actually came to me on a stream of consciousness. I didn't even sit down and write this. I just spoke to the camera. There's basically that it analyzes the Apollo 11 press conference where everyone says, "Oh, they didn't go to the moon. They look like they're lying." And I see three men that have gone through an incredible spiritual experience.
Yeah, and something's strange there, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've never went back. I think what Lovecraft said in the Call of Cthulhu at the intro to the story, he goes, we live on a placid world, isolated, and we're not meant to go very far. I think
it feels like that, Thomas. Like we landed there in 69 and then to 71, and then now, you know, next year is going to be the 50th anniversary, half a century since we've been back to the moon. So
and as we send probes into the solar system, look how incredibly strange Jupiter is with the high resolution photographs that come back. Pluto, for God's sake, you know, the planet, they thought Pluto was going to be just a ball of ice, and you look at this planet through the Gothard Flight Center photographs, and the thing looks alive. The close-up shots of Jupiter, terrifying, and then this hexagon at the top of Saturn. It's almost like it's like I covered that in my new book. It's almost like the planet Saturn is conjuring itself out of its own magic circle of the rings.
Well, I mean, it feels like NASA knows a lot about a lot of the stuff you seem to know about. I think they seem to be like magicians on a grand scale. I don't know.
Oh, I think they are. Well, a lot of them are
Yeah.
Freemasons, and a lot of them were
Yeah.
Nazi occultists that came over after the end of the war. But I think genuinely they keep a lot from the public.
Yeah.
It's not that they're lying to us. That it's made of cheese and it's full of space aliens and It's nothing like that. It is what we see, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's strangeness out there of what it is. It's surreal. It's like the universe was invented by Salvador Dali on acid, and our consciousness cannot function very too far away from this planet. I'm convinced of it. And those guys you can invoke the whole thing of like, well, they didn't go to the moon, it was a hoax. I believe they did, and I believe what they saw there. That's why so many of them came back. And Michael Collins even said, to describe what we saw and felt up there, you'd have to be a mystic, an artist, a scientist, and a poet and a philosopher, and you still couldn't do it.
Wow. So because in that Apollo 11 conference, they did look in utter shock. They look like it's almost like post-traumatic or something.
That's a guy. Well, I've demonstrated things to people in the past, magical things, and that's how they look afterwards. That's what their whole reality has melted away in front of them.
So maybe Kubrick's angle on 2001 going into space, that seemed to be something similar to what Michael Collins was talking about, just a trip that you could never describe, but you have to experience it.
Yeah, that's what I see space as now, and even like H.P. Lovecraft with his stories. Like I see space now as a purely spiritual thing. I mean, and that brings us back to David Bowie, because David Bowie was the kind of like the cosmic spaceman, like Major Tom and all this kind of thing. He finished up and look, the final video for Black Star. I mean, what the hell was that? That was, and
he was on I saw that, and that was. I mean, you're right. That was pure occult. That whole video, like a 9-minute video, and it was a brilliant short film. But he was on the. Did you see? He was on He was on another planet there, and when you opened up the visor, it was just like a skeleton. So I'd love for you to decode that in the video, even if you could.
Yeah, I should. I've looked at that. And I can't decode it, but I saw my friend showed me that video before it was released. Just immediately after it was released, a huge Bowie fan, and he said, you have to see this, just right up your street. And he's not in the culture and into magic or anything, and he even knew right away, like the 2001 Space Odyssey effect. The video for Black Star is in the same camp. People don't know what it means. They don't care. They don't care. The subconscious mind knows what it means, and that's enough.
I think that's it. Yeah, they're trying to understand it consciously, and you can never understand it consciously, and they're not getting it. The final thing on this magic I want to say is this just crossed my mind, is that as the organized religions are coming to the end, people see through them, right?
We hope.
Yeah, and then you're right. And then even spiritual, like I've been through sort of this, I've gone through that new age stuff, and it's just, you realize it's just a lot of crap after a while. And so you want to discard that. Then what's left? It's either atheism, or we look back to the past to say, well, how were the ancient peoples? And I think more and more people, even atheists, are at least open to looking at this magic stuff. And maybe this is maybe the religion of the ancients was the religion of the future, if you can call it a religion.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of truth to that. I think that's very well put, James. Yeah, a lot of people I know who are atheists are fascinated by magic, and they don't laugh at me, and they don't think it's nonsense. When the way I explain it, I just say, look, it's how I do science, but using an artistic process rather than a laboratory one. And they're very fascinated by it. And there's a lot of research programs now in the European universities into magic, and it always has been. There always been huge things into parapsychology and psi and all this stuff. Yeah. It's just that they're always played down, but it's always been well investigated. I think ironically it was things like Higgs boson at the CERN particle collider that actually got people, like, I've been to CERN and I've looked at it. And
have you really? Wow.
Well, I haven't been inside. I haven't been inside it, but now outside it. But you see this, like in Geneva, this lit up place on the side of a hill that uses up all the power in the world, but a massive amount of power to what? Look for nothing. And there's a big statue of Shiva, the destroyer.
I saw that. Yeah.
And the whole place, it's a big, huge temple. It's the world's largest magic temple.
So do you think CERN's the beginning of merging science and spirituality, or science and magic, or something?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Right.
you could actually make the point that CERN is the first great pagan temple since the classical era.
Mm. Okay. Well, it's kind of like I'm not really into Dan Brown's books, but he's a son of a high level Freemason, and he wrote, "Science and religion are not at odds. It's just that science is too young to understand." And I think
Yeah.
maybe science is getting to that point where we don't have as much conflict between different sorts of believers. But even maybe magic is making that crossover too, where it's become someone like yourself are starting to make it almost a scientific process as well.
Yeah, and there's nothing new in that. I mean, I read a book when I was 11 on magic that were basically outlining the same ideas in the language of the day. But I mean, David Conway's book on magic, which Primer and Magic, I was 11 when I read that, and he was even talking about quantum physics back then. So there you go.
Okay.
It's been around a while, but it's just that now we have a better language and more examples we can apply towards it. Yeah, I definitely think that's what's going to happen. I think material science has kind of reached a buffer, and I've noticed a lot of these sort of reductionist mullahs that we used to have on the internet for years, putting down anything that wasn't hard science, the sort of like bastard offspring, the love childs of Richard Dawkins. They're all
Yeah.
they don't exist. There's not as many of them as there used to be. Have you noticed that?
I've noticed that. It's in the last couple of years, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not. They were once like a pestilence.
Mm.
Now you don't see so many of them anymore. They've got that kind of nasty arrogance. A lot of them are gone, but also a lot of them too are like listed the fellas like me and other
I
guys.
agree. Yeah, I was going to say it's not just that they've gone. I think those same people. I even know some where you couldn't bring up these subjects 5 years ago, and now those same people have actually evolved into something else.
Yeah, because they were ignorant as well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they were, they talked magic. You think Harry Potter or something like that. They didn't know what it was, and when you start talking about the ancient mystery schools and the ancient histories and paganism and stuff, they're very. See, a lot of them are also Satanists. Now, I know there's another one. A Satanist just means someone who doesn't go to church. It doesn't have anything to do with worshiping the devil. That's all that means. And they have no fixed belief, although they might have a kind of that's where the word Satanism originally came from.
Yeah.
And Satanism, in the kind of religious sense, is a kind of a form of ritualized atheism. I'm talking about LaVey Satanism. That's all it is. It just basically doesn't believe in any kind of superstition, and all the dress up.
So some of it was people even who have been targeted by witch hunts and things like that by these massive institutions like Islam, Christianity, and they could be, it's quite a brave move in an ancient era, say, or before our era. It's quite a brave move, like in medieval times, to actually give the middle finger to a crucifix or something like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that crucifix represented a big ugly institution that was killing people en masse. It's not necessarily you're not actually saying that you despise everything good in that religion. It's more the overall thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you just walk away from it. It's just like that's all it is. But you also you can. I think like a lot of atheists I know had flirted with Satanism.
Okay.
Some of my friends were quite big into it, and now they're all sort of getting into magic. So it's funny. It's almost like there's been an evolution. We brought them back to where they should have been. But again, it's about the delivery. You're not going to get anyone to take a serious interest in magic if you're playing, Katy Perry videos and screaming about Satan is now invoked inside at this point in the video, and now she's making a sacrifice to Baphomet. You don't even know what Baphomet is, and that's not going to help anyone. That helps nobody, and it only helps the people who make the video make it richer. But if you have someone say, well, look, these are symbols targeting the subconscious mind. You have things called phosphenes, which are neurological form constants in the brain that are attracted to certain shapes, like the all-seeing eye.
Is that right? Okay.
Oh yeah, the all-seeing eye, the spiral, the swastika,
the pyramid,
the pyramid, and even the Star of David, as they call it, the hexagram.
Yeah.
And they're in the brain already, so your brain, they're just targeting your brain.
Gee, so it's interesting that the ancients knew that those symbols had the most impact.
Oh yeah, I can show you. If
Yeah.
you ever come over here to Sligo and County in Ireland, I'll show you rock art that has swastikas 5,000 years ago, and
Wow.
the
Yeah.
all-seeing eye. Yeah,
Mm.
they always. Well, what happened was they used to lock when they would go inside passage chambers and these cairns, and they were in total darkness. What happens is the brain, in order for the optic nerves of the brain not to shut down, it generates these neurological form constants called phosphenes,
Yeah.
and these shapes start appearing in front of you because otherwise your optical cortex might actually be destroyed. So
Okay.
it keeps it occupied with shapes it develops inside the brain, and there was a slang name for this called the prisoner cinema. And when they would lock people in the cooler or in confinement and solitary with no lights,
Oh
they
yeah.
start they start all seeing these shapes dancing in front of them. That was the prisoner cinema. They're phosphenes, and a lot of them shapes will be what you see on Neolithic and Paleolithic rock art, and they're the classic magical symbols of today.
Right. Gee. So it's just it's almost like I'm listening to all this and comprehending where we are at as a society, and it's almost as if our past is our future. It'll be in a different way, but we're really all the peoples that we've put down from long ago. Well, we've kind of debunked everything else we've got now, so that's all that's left. Combining that with what our scientists have achieved, I guess.
Yeah, well, the internet. There you go. The internet is the new magic circle, the new arena of magic and sorcery, and
Mm.
we saw that last year with the election of Donald Trump, and you had like the Kekistanis and Kek and the resurrection of a pagan god through 4chan, and how the part that played in the Trump election. Oh, that was pure magic and sorcery, and then using memes to
Right.
actually, win the election for Trump. Well, they actually were against Clinton, like myself,
Yeah.
and yeah, there you go. I mean, the magical arena now is the internet, and where does we got that technology?
Yeah.
What does
Well, I've
technology give us? Magic.
right. Yeah. That I mean. Yeah. Just the broader definition you're opening up of magic instead of all this ritual and stuff is really I find it really inspiring. It can work in the arts, it can work in science, and just in people's daily life. What
Yeah,
I'm really interested to know what future projects that you're doing. I mean, you're doing so much multimedia. You're in film, books, painting. What are your future plans, Thomas?
I just finished a short book on the Round Towers of Ireland, and that's it. I'm done with writing for a while. I
Yeah,
had to get that out because that was the final section of the Druid Code is about this mystery of these strange towers in
yeah,
Ireland that are all over the place, and
right.
so I just did, I wanted to flesh it out forward. So I've made a small book on that, and so
Okay.
I'm promoting sorcery. But now I'm back with the megaliths. That's what I want to get the camera out and go on the road and
Oh,
go
that'd
around
be awesome. That'd be
and
awesome.
make
Like
make
road trip.
make more films. Yeah, I want to get
Yeah.
out. I want to get to. I want to get to Iberia. I want to get to Sardinia again, and Malta. I want to get out there and start filming the megaliths and around England and Ireland and Scotland. And I want to. That story is still not properly told from a
No, it's
magical
not.
context. And so
Yeah.
that's. I want to do that now for a while. I'm actually sick and tired of writing, to be honest with you. And so I
Yeah.
want to make.
Yeah.
I want to start making films for a while.
Oh, awesome. And you can upload that even when you're traveling around Europe, can't you? That's the age we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beauty of it, and you can actually get ideas in real time. Like you might show a piece of rock art in anywhere and so on, and put it on the internet, and someone say, "Have you thought about this?" or "What about that?" And then you have like new content for the film. It's like really beautiful when you think about it.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a case now with the world we're in where you could sit there writing a book for, say, a year and a certain number of people will read it, but you can make a film so quickly and say, in 1 hour, you can say a lot of stuff, and maybe it won't be as erudite as if you wrote it, but that's the sort of world we're going to, where I think maybe that goes back to the symbology where our brains that are trained to think more visually, I think.
Yeah, well, there'll always be books because
Yeah,
there's a
true.
power. There's a power in the physical book.
Isn't there?
There's a
Yeah.
There'll always that will never go away. But
No.
it'll never sound the numbers it will because of the internet. But
Right.
then we can make short documentaries on YouTube, like the last one I made from between mortals and gods, a
Right.
short film I made on magic that came out in November.
Okay.
No, before Christmas, and it's already got well over 100,000 views without
Mm.
me even really promoting it or anything.
Well,
So just,
wow. Yeah, I see that. You're really, and I think partly I think people are being attracted to you, and I'd really encourage anyone listening to check out your stuff because there's no fear in it, and that is pretty rare on the internet. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It's just take this on board, but you always kind of warn people not to get sucked into any sort of fear-based reality when you're analyzing it, and that's awesome.
Yeah, emotional attachment, and then when it goes right or wrong, then get your emotions out.
Yeah, and you're also giving talks as well. Like I know you're coming down here to Australia soon. You've been in England a lot. You've been in America too. So it's really opening up.
Yeah, I'm getting asked around a lot. I'll probably be in Australia. I was supposed to go in the summer, but they decided to put it back later for the people or promoters' reasons, personal reasons. Yeah,
right.
I'll definitely be in Brisbane in September, I think, and then maybe Sydney and a few other places. And soon I'm going to be doing a tour of England. I'm doing the AV event which is a huge event there, like alternative thinkers. And then I'm doing an event at the Witchcraft Museum of all places. And then
that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
And then Megalithomania, which is probably the biggest thing on the biggest megalithic discussion conference in the world probably at this point, at Glastonbury, and I'm going to be talking about the magic of the megaliths there. So yeah, it's great. I can't complain. I'm delighted that now people are now ready for a lot of these messages.
I think so.
And yeah, it's good. It's nice to see that. It's nice to see that like there's a real genuine interest for the first time out there. Like you said, it's not fear-based. People are genuinely interested for all the mature and proper reasons.
And so the best way for people who want to follow you, is it thomassheridanarts.com? Was that the one? I'm going by memory.
That's the one.
Right.
You'll get links to everything from there.
Okay, thomassheridanarts.com. All
right.
right.
And the books and the events are always on the front page there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll link to all your books as well, and I look forward to catching up either when I'm in Britain or Ireland next, or definitely when you come down here for these talk. Love to catch up with you.
Yeah, I definitely would like that. Thank you very much, James. I've enjoyed the show.
Thank you, Thomas. Cheers.